Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we are discussing the second chapter of the Great Master. The second part, not the second chapter, but the second part and the first chapter of that second part, which is in Bengali known as Sadak Bhav of Sri Ramakrishna. So as we had discussed earlier, we have 5 parts. The original Bengali Sri Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasang. And the first part was his Balya Bhav or his childhood days. Then we came to the second part, where in the introduction, Swami Shardananji discusses the need to understand the sadhana of or the incidents connected with the spiritual disciplines which an incarnation or a prophet performs in his lifetime. And as I mentioned last time, in the most of the lives of different incarnations like Jesus, Buddha, even the other incarnations, you will find a lot of mention of the childhood days, a little bit. In case of Krishna, you will find. And you will also find his role as guiding a lot of spiritual aspirants. But his own sadhana, what he did, how did he practice spiritual disciplines, or did he practice spiritual disciplines? Obviously, when an incarnation comes, or any great person to whom we look for inspiration when we study their lives, it is absolutely essential to know how they perform sadhana, because their lives are for not only inspiring us, but to show us the way. If an incarnation performs certain deeds which are definitely unique to him and considered to be divine, then the spiritual aspirants will feel, okay, that is out of our reach. He's an incarnation and I'm an ordinary human being, Jiva. So what shall I do with that? I can't learn anything. But if he is intensely human like us, since he takes a human form, and most of these prophets and incarnations were historical personalities whom we look upon for inspiration. So, Swami Shardanji made very clear in the introduction that the need for discussing the spiritual sadhana of an incarnation is twofold. One is to show that they are not superhuman efforts made by only certain people. It should be possible for all. That is what Buddha said, because they depended a lot on him. And when Ananda was worried, what will happen to us after you pass away? We looked upon you for support, guidance, your grace. Then he said, I have given you what I had to give you. You also perform, just follow the teachings of whatever he preached. And do your sadhana and be a light unto yourself. Atma Dipo Bhava. Be a light unto yourself. That means you do the sadhana which I prescribe, and you'll see that you'll reach the same state as I did. So that is one of the reasons why it is important to understand every great life who is an inspiration for us. In particular, the way they lived, how they spoke, how they walked, how they behaved with other people, and how they most importantly for spiritual aspirants, how they practice spiritual sadhana in their own lives. So after explaining the need for uh, understanding the sadhana aspect, Swami Shardanand writes one full volume on Sri Ramakrishna as a sadhaka. So in the 5 parts, as I told you, the first part is about his childhood, how he grew up, what were his aspirations, what did he do, and second was his younger days when he himself was filled with a lot of divine fervor, trying to do some sadhana in different ways. Of course, we can't imitate all of that because it's almost humanly impossible to do the sadhana as Sri Ramakrishna did. But his life or his sadhana portion serves an inspiration for many of us, whichever path we choose, because he followed all the different paths, not only within Hinduism, but uh, other faiths as well, and showed that if one is sincere, if one has the yearning, one can reach the goal no matter which path he follows. Then in the second chapter now, this was what we discussed last time. But in the second chapter we are in the second chapter actually, or maybe after the introduction, it is the first chapter. The heading is Spiritual Aspirant and Spiritual Discipline. Now, why should we discuss this? So, if first point was that if we want to understand Sri Ramakrishna as a spiritual aspirant, as a sadhaka, first we must understand what sadhana is, because it means so many things to so many people. For some people, some readers may comment that people of India especially, everybody knows something about sadhana. So what is the need? You just discuss his life. Why should you go into or lengthen the book? Why are you making the book longer by spending so much energy in trying to explain what sadhana is? We all know, we have read the lives of so many people. You just start explaining what Sri Ramakrishna did as a sadhana. But here Swami Shardanand is very particular. He says, from time immemorial, no doubt, Indians have spent a lot of time, at least the religious people, in trying to do what they think is religion. India has been an intensely religious country as far as the theoretical aspects are concerned. That is why Swamiji says that what was lacking in the Indian mindset was the practical application of that theory. They seem to know everything about religion. You ask anybody on the street, he said, you ask him about economics or politics, he will not know so much. But if you ask him about his religion, the faith he follows, he will claim that he knows everything, even if he knows absolutely nothing. So, Swami Shardanand says, we are spending some time to discuss what sadhana is, because very few people or people often don't know the real importance or significance of what they are practicing as so-called sadhana. So, even though one has a tradition to follow, or everybody follows a tradition, people just follow it without any inquiry whether the tradition has come down to us in the pure form, how many modifications has been made to suit, and how diluted the message has become. Buddha would have told something, Sri Krishna would have told something in the Gita, but when it percolates down, do we really understand the message of Gita or the Buddha's teachings? Do we often refer to the original? Even in a country like England, where Christianity was fairly well established when Vivekananda came, he told them point blank on their face that you are not Christians. You go back to Christ. What did he mean? What he meant was that if you want to follow, or if you claim that you are a Christian, then you should follow Christ. Are we not following Christ? Are we not following Krishna? Are we not following Buddha? That is the question many people ask. Those who profess that they belong to a particular faith, they naturally ask this question. But very often we find what the original message, somewhere down the line after centuries, is diluted by a succession of disciples. And maybe it has been diluted because people found that the ideal is too difficult. So Sri Ramakrishna said the best way to call yourself as a Christian is to go back to Christ. He said the question is not whether you should follow Krishna or Christ or Buddha. The question is, if you have to be a Christian, be a true Christian. If you have to be a Hindu, be a true Hindu. So for that, we need to understand how does one become a true Christian or a true Hindu or a true follower of any sect which one professes to follow. So the direct experience of spiritual truths which are recorded in the biographies become very important. Now say Buddha tells his disciples, I have shown you the path, these are the steps, and when you do it, these are the experiences you will have. Even Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, everywhere in the sutras, he will very clearly indicate what is the first stage, second stage, how do you progress. A very scientific approach to the psychology of religion, what happens in the mind. Nobody is asked to believe blindly. Patanjali, in fact, says that only when you follow these Ashtanga steps, when you follow one after another, experience the truths, then you accept it and then you move forward. So also, without understanding what sadhana is, if I claim that I follow such and such a prophet, such and such a religion, then we will not be reaching the goal. That is the idea. So it is very necessary, according to Swami Shardananji, to spend some time to understand who is a sadhaka, what does sadhana mean, what is a spiritual approach to life mean. So people have a lot of strange ideas according to him. So losing sight of the goal of sadhana is one of the main obstacles. What exactly do I mean when I practice spirituality? What is the goal I try to attain? We are very particular about our other goals in life. Suppose I want to become a millionaire or create 1 billion pounds of wealth. I know what is my target, how do I set about to achieve it, and I know how to measure whether I'm making progress. At every step of the way, I calculate. This is how I'll progress. We make short-term goals and finally we have a long-term goal. So also, Swami Shardananji says, in spiritual life, there are a lot of erroneous conceptions about sadhana. First of all is about the goal itself. What does religion do? So Swami Vivekananda used to make a lot of fun. He said, if you ask a child what is the goal of life, a very small child will say to eat toffees, to eat chocolates, because that is the goal. Or some people may want to drive a racing car when he sees, or become a footballer without even planning. As he grows, his goals may change. So also people start following religion with different goals in mind. Many of the goals are erroneous according to Swami Shardananji. And he says some people consider some kind of mortification, denial of something, or performance of certain rituals which are unique to their culture, or go to a rare place, a place of pilgrimage. That constitutes religion. If you go to a particular place of worship on regularly and do some kind of puja, ritual, or any type of worship, we call that person, or we tend to call that person, that he is a very God-fearing person, very religious person, because he visits the temple, church, or mosque very regularly. But we often don't ask what does he do by going there. So also, some people who follow the path of yoga and other meditation, they do a lot of breath control, pranayama, this, that, for various reasons. Some of them may be as secular as just improving one's health. And one combines it with the religion, saying that this is what my religion is. I am least bothered about the goal, ultimate goal, and not even bothered whether I'll reach it. But this is what I want to do because this is my intermediate goal. I want to use religion to improve my health, or maybe improve to a certain extent. Some people say it may improve my mind or improve my prosperity, or maybe I'll have to work less. Maybe some grace of God will enable me to earn a lot of money. So there are hundreds of ways. And he says, strange activities, this is okay. A intermediate goal, some worldly people may aspire for with the help of religion. That is okay. But Sardanji says sometimes they become obsessive regarding certain practices. They don't even know whether it is benefiting them or harming them, and still they continue. So he says it can even result in a deranged mind if certain excesses are performed without being qualified for it. See, for example, some people are excessively obsessed with breath control. And Swami Vivekananda very clearly said, pranayama, unless it is done under the training of a trained guru or somebody who is an adept in it, there will be only disaster. It may even lead to a deranged mind. So no doubt we begin with a lot of passion, a lot of devotion, but as we proceed, if we do it the wrong way, the impact may be quite different. So that is why Swami Shardanji says, before doing sadhana, please be very careful and try to understand what sadhana is before even attempting it. So there are many things where a wrong belief or a wrong faith may lead you, not only will not lead you towards the goal, but it will take you where you can't do your normal activities. So he says very often it has been found in the name of religion, people become extremists, or extremists in the sense they perform extreme practices, wrong practices, which lead to destruction of their own self and others. So there is another class of people which seems to be very common, is that people are obsessed with the sort of, so much of importance is given. They feel that there are vibrations all around them, evil vibrations. When you come to religion, you will find all these obsessive ideas which are harmful. They feel they are so careful that they just want to avoid evil impressions and evil vibrations, and they keep going from place to place saying that these vibrations are not good, it disturbs my spiritual. It's just a stage of mind which you have to deal with yourself. The impact of external circumstances, external thoughts, external situations may have some impact. But the real goal of spiritual life is to make yourself so strong that you don't fall, none of the external influences influence you. It's just like immunity in the physical system. We say many of the diseases don't impact a person with a strong immunity. So having a weak immunity makes him susceptible to different diseases, physical diseases. That is what the doctors say, and immune boosters are given. But similarly, in a spiritual field, we'll find that people who make a lot of fuss about things external, they don't bother that there are enough problems within which have to be solved. And all these require a proper mindset. First, to scientifically root out all the problems that are within, then be bothered about things external. No doubt external circumstances matter a lot, but one need not be obsessive with it. Like some people have an extreme obsession about food. I will not touch this food, that food, in the name of religion. Not because they are scientifically proven to be bad for health or something like that, but just because certain beliefs tell them to be obsessive. So any kind of obsession is not religion. This is the second point he makes. First is the wrong goal. Choosing a wrong goal itself is a big obstacle. They form an erroneous conception about sadhana or upasana. But there are other obsessions which are very commonly seen in spiritual aspirants. So Swami Shardan is trying to make a list of different difficulties, different types of natures of different people who claim that they are on their way towards a spiritual goal, but in fact they are just wasting their time, or in fact going on the wrong path. Some people, then the next point he makes is, some people consider those prescribed disciplines to be sadhana, like breathing and all. They think that this is the be all and end all of sadhana and claim that it is suitable for every aspirant to perform or practice. So in Hinduism, there is a concept known as adhikari. Adhikari means who is competent enough to even do these spiritual practices. At every stage of life, every stage of sadhana, if the text is genuine, if it follows an authentic tradition, the spiritual discipline will insist on certain requirements, certain basic requirements, which are to be fulfilled first before even beginning sadhana. If you see the commentaries of Shankaracharya on the different Upanishads, he says, he spells out the qualifications, minimum qualifications, even to study Vedanta. So they call him an adhikari. What are the qualities of adhikari? So it delineates them, outlines them, and says, are these qualifications there in you? It's just like fulfilling certain conditions before seeking admission to a university. Anybody and everybody can't be admitted. So also, people have to make themselves competent. And if one does not take that precaution, then wrong people will try to practice something which is either wrong or beyond their control, beyond their capacity, and come to grief. Like he says, a lot of breathing practices which pass by the name of pranayama are practiced not according to tradition, but according to the whims and fancies of somebody who claims to be a guru. And in the process, it does a lot of harm to that aspirant. So there are many things, because these are mystical things. Swami Shardananji is very particular that when it comes to mystical things, one has to follow an authentic tradition. The harm that is caused by not following an authentic tradition, and to undo what has been done by following a wrong authentic tradition, is the chances and the possibilities are great. So the second important thing that Swami Shardanji mentions at the very outset, it's not discouraging people. He says that people who are intensely attached to sense objects, the objects of the world, and at the same time they want higher spiritual experiences, he's cautioning them. He says both can't go together. Of course, in the Indian tradition, there is a gradual giving up of certain sense objects, whereas if you go to the purest, the highest teachings of Christianity or even Hinduism or also Buddhism, they first say you get rid of all your attachment and then come to religion, which is almost next to impossible. At least Hinduism gives them a graded way to progress in spiritual life gradually, because they know it's impractical for most of the people to give up things which are very dear to them. So he says there is another sect of people who feel, contrary to what is told, that you can't have God and mammon at the same time. So if you really want God, then there are certain things which one has to voluntarily, happily give up. And you cannot insist. There are certain people who believe certain mantras, certain traditional religious practices, irrespective of the way of life we lead, can take us to the goal. So Swami Shardanji says it is almost impossible. Not only impossible, it is harmful. And he says people have gone to the extent of believing in charms and the potency of certain uh, non-traditional mantras to do certain deeds, certain acts, to follow many things which will give them, which they hope will give them worldly prosperity. But they don't understand the type of harm they are inflicting upon themselves. So he says it will be not out of place to discuss the truths of sadhana with in clarity, so that each one can find out where does he stand when it comes to sadhana or upasana. So, and he says it is not his own. He says it is thousands of years of spiritual practices by great prophets, great saints, which have come down to us. We need to find out or select from a vast literature only those which are really useful, purposeful, and which will really take us towards the goal. That is one of the most difficult thing. And even though they may be difficult, if with persistent effort, if one follows that, then only, he says, you will go reach the goal. So now, first, the next point or the next page heading is, or the subject heading is, sadhana's ultimate result, the goal, is the experience of Brahman in all beings. Now, first we have to understand what this Brahman is or what God is. What do you mean by seeing God in all beings? Is it ever possible? We see beings as beings. We see a dog as a dog, a cat as a cat, nature around us as nature. So what is this strange thing of seeing God in all beings? So Swami Shardananji spent some time discussing what it is. So he goes very systematically, giving first the goal of spiritual life, which may be very difficult apparently right now to attain, but nevertheless one has to discuss. This is the ultimate result. We may not attain it in this life or several lives, but the goal cannot change for us. The goal has to be the ultimate. Whether we reach halfway, midway, or a little of it, little of religion, as Sri Krishna promises in the Bhagavad Gita, because Arjuna is worried when he hears the first two chapters, especially the second chapter, where Krishna sets up a very, very high goal, the Sthita Prajna and all the different states. Arjuna is afraid because he has none of those qualifications. So he feels that, oh my God, this is a very difficult task Krishna has given. Then he asks a question, suppose I don't reach, what will happen to me if I don't reach the goal? And in the process lose both the world and the spiritual life. Both if I lose and I'm stuck in between. So Krishna gives an assurance, which is very, very, very important to understand, where he says nothing spiritual is ever lost. Because normally the idea of people have, especially at the end of their life, is suddenly they get a feeling that all the wealth that I have earned is going to be lost, or maybe I'm not able to use it. It will just, then they are worried about that. First half of their life, they'll worry about how to gather, and then, so what happens to our spiritual wealth? Naturally, Arjuna is asking this question, anticipating that suppose he has done so much sadhana as Krishna is telling him to do. In the first chapter, he is telling him lots of spiritual advice and the goal. Everything has been so beautifully explained by Sri Krishna, but Arjuna gets confused. He thinks it's just like suddenly you are on the way to prosperity and suddenly by the end of your life, all the things that you hold dear are to be left behind, you feel very sad. Oh, did I earn all these things? I could not even enjoy it, and now these things are taken away from me. So he thinks in spiritual life also, suppose I do sadhana and I don't reach the goal, then is it not futile? Just as it is futile to have worldly prosperity and not take the things with you to your next life. You don't obviously take, but spiritual truths or spiritual sadhana is not like the gross accumulation of wealth or prosperity. He says, whatever little you do in the spiritual field, nothing is lost. Not a single practice which is beneficial according to the tradition will be lost. Even a little of this religion, swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. The immediate result is it will save you or from great fear. Mahato bhayat. Bhayat means fear. So one of the main benefits of following religion is first it won't be lost. Whatever karma we do, whatever spiritual sadhana we do, unlike the money that we earn or the wealth that we earn or the property that we accumulate, you don't have to leave it behind. That is one assurance Krishna is giving. And he says it will be taken forward, and either you will be born in a good family or where you can continue your sadhana, or so many other things may happen, but everything will go with you. That is the idea. So the goal of life, the question whether if I don't reach the goal of life, here Sri Ramakrishna used to say, as Shardananji quotes here, seeing Brahman or God in all beings is the last word in sadhana. That in fact he told to Swami Shardananji. Because Swami Shardananji, when he went as a young boy, Sharat Chandra Chakravarti, he went there, and as a young boy, Thakur always, Sri Ramakrishna used to ask everyone, what do you expect by spiritual practice? What is your idea of goal, of your goal of life? He used to ask questions, make them think themselves. So he said, he must have read in some Upanishads, he said, I want to see Brahman or God in every human being. Then Sri Ramakrishna mentioned, oh, that is the last word of sadhana. I mean, that is too high a goal. Anyway, with his grace, he was able to attain it. But he says, at the culmination of all your sadhana, one reaches that plane. And Swami Shardananji doesn't say that because Sri Ramakrishna said, he quotes the Vedas and the Upanishads. The most authoritative Hindu scriptures support this statement. The scriptures say that whatever you see in the world is truly one non-dual Brahman. Be it gross, be it subtle. Gross as in the universe that you can see with your senses. And subtle in the sense that anything that is to do with things that you cannot perceive with your senses, but you can think with your mind, you can imagine, there are so many aspects of our personality which are subtle. They may not be perceived, but they can be imagined, they can be thought of. So, whether it is gross or subtle, sentient or insentient, there are many inanimate objects, stones. So does this statement mean even there is this underlying concept of Brahman or God, which is all pervading? If you take all the major religions, one of the adjectives of God is that he is sarvavyapi, he is all pervading. Almighty, you can say Almighty. Some people call him Almighty because if he is all pervading, he is everywhere spread in the universe. So whether it is gross or subtle universe, sentient or insentient universe, bricks, wood, clay, stone, trees, plants, and animate things like human beings, animals, demigods, ghosts. You take the everything created, If you see the whole Prakriti, it's made of so many layers of existence. It's not just physical existence. There are forces which you cannot see, but you can feel. There are objects that you cannot see, but you can imagine. So, seeing, hearing, the five senses, touching, smelling, tasting, the same Brahman, he exists pervading all. So, if he exists pervading the stones and also in the cat, in the animal, in the tree, in the plant, we are experiencing Brahman. This is one of the truths which we have to experience, not just theoretically discuss, because theoretically we understand. But what does it mean by tasting Brahman, by hearing Brahman, by smelling Brahman, that reality? How can we do? Because the taste or the smell or the sight tells us that it is a certain object, it has a form, it is there today, tomorrow it will vanish. But where is Brahman in all this? Where is the sense? Where is the experience of God, which I have to have in this? It is not possible right now in this state. That's why this is the goal of life. That's the ultimate goal of life. There may be several intermediate goals in spiritual life, but this is the ultimate goal. And Swami Shardananji was told that right now, keep this in mind that this is the ultimate goal. Ultimately, but you have to pass through many stages to even reach that. So, the question a non-believer in religion will ask, obviously he will ask, and anticipating that question, Swami Shardananji says, although according to the Upanishads, according to the Vedas, you accomplish all your daily activities that we do in and through Brahman. That's the idea. But why are we not aware of it? Why do we think we are doing it? Every time something happens, we either consider ourselves, we blame ourselves or blame somebody else. We never say that it is God's will. The concept of Sharanagati, or in Hindu tradition, it is known as resigning yourself to God's will. Taking everything as it comes. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita also it is mentioned. What does a Sthita Prajna do? He accepts, he is a witness, he sees everything. It's a very difficult state to attain, to accept everything without any strong likes or dislikes. Just accept things as they come. It may appear to be a very simple sadhana, but it is one of the most difficult things. The moment we get some unpleasant thing, we just run away from it. We have a dvesha towards it. And the moment we get certain nice things, we just run after it. So it is very easy to say, but the most difficult to practice this giving up of likes and dislikes. As Sri Krishna says, so seeing Brahman, all our activities are happening because of this all-pervading Brahman. That is the ultimate truth. The scripture tells us. But when we really deal with the world, we believe that we are dealing with a multiplicity of objects or persons, and we get involved in quarrels, fights, pleasant experiences. Then we classify them as good experiences, bad experiences, likes, dislikes. So he says we don't experience. If we had experienced the same God or same Brahman, then we would not have complained. Whatever comes, if he's all-pervading Brahman, then no further sadhana is possible. Have we the capacity to reach that state? Then he says, very nicely, like a lawyer, he's arguing. Suppose, for example, you don't believe in this statement. That is not the goal of my life. My goal of life is to just eat, drink, and be merry. I don't bother. So he's anticipating such questions, and he himself is asking questions on behalf of the reader. He says, because that he feels will be easy for the reader to understand if we set forth in question and answer form. Now you see, most of the Upanishads and the Hindu scriptures normally follow the question-answer pattern. That is why a child right from beginning When he starts thinking, he begins with questions. Unfortunately, it's a different thing that we don't have the patience to answer. But he comes with fantastic questions. And if right training has to be given, Sri Ramakrishna's life, Swamiji's life, if you see, right from childhood, they are very inquisitive. If for some reason somebody doesn't ask questions, something is wrong. The more questions a child asks, so the normal system of explaining the Upanishadic truths is pose a question by an imaginary aspirant, and the people who have written the scriptures or who have been inspired to write the scriptures, always did it in the form of conversations, especially Upanishads. Even Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna. Whoever might have conceived of this wonderful scripture, all scriptures, there are questions. In fact, Buddha's famous teachings are all in the form of question and answers. Because there will be some character like Ananda or somebody who will ask and Buddha will answer. Then somebody will ask, Buddha will answer. Gospel also is like that. Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So, Swami Shardanji now wants to follow this method in discussing this chapter or this topic of sadhana, what sadhana is, what is the ultimate goal of sadhana, and why it is the ultimate goal. Why should I accept it just because this scripture, Upanishad says? I have my own views. If I decide to disagree, I should have the freedom. I may not disagree. It's fine. So the first question which everybody will ask, if you say that everything is pervaded with Brahman or the ultimate reality or God, the first question is, why do we not perceive everything as Brahman? The answer is, according to Vedanta, that you are deluded. Deluded in the sense, it is out of ignorance. And until that ignorance is dispelled, how can you detect it? We recognize our delusions. See, for example, if you go to a psychiatrist, if a person is deluded or has some kind of hallucination, he will say, I see these things. There are many people in spiritual life also. You can't convince them that what they are seeing is hallucination. It has nothing to do with maybe a very strong imagination or some defect of the mind will make them feel things and imagine things so intensely that they think they are real. And no amount of convincing them will change their view. They see we are seeing this. So it is a delusion, but then till he gets rid of delusion, the psychiatrist or the psychologist can hardly do anything. Similarly, other diseases which psychiatrists find it difficult to handle are certain obsessions which certain people have because of wrong habits. And it is very difficult to convince people that what you are thinking is wrong, that it is a delusion. So it is very often observed that once that delusion goes away, and once the counselor or the psychiatrist helps the patient to understand that, don't worry, these fears are imaginary, these anxieties are imaginary. And he has a way of explaining that. If he's a good analyst, he'll say that these things have not happened in your life. Why are you anxious for something that is not going to happen? Why this obsessive disorder? I mean, why this obsession? Why this delusion? People go with strange kinds of ideas. Even in spiritual life, you see, people see these hallucinations and want an explanation for all these things. And if they are told, they feel very much disappointed. I said, no, I saw it. I saw these things, that things. And if we tell them you need to take some good food because it is lack of nutrition, some physiological disorder that gives rise to such delusions. So you have to be careful. They feel pain. They think people will justify their delusions or justify their visions or hallucinations that they feel. So Until the delusion goes away, you can't face or you can't come in touch with truth. So it is only by comparing, he says, how do we recognize these delusions? So as a good psychiatrist would do, he says we can understand that something is a delusion by comparing our perceptions with real objects or states. You need to have a basis for comparison in order to discover that delusion. So one of the main goals of sadhana, intermediate or the process of sadhana, is to remove this delusion or ignorance. We are, because of our wrong habits, we have accumulated thousands of delusions, thousands of preconceived ideas, thousands of opinions which other normal people will not share. We have our peculiarities. We have our they in psychology they give so many names these days, obsessive disorder and all those things. They're just names. It's holding on to something which is not true. In plain Vedantic language, it is known as ajnana or delusion, wrong knowledge. So what is right knowledge? What is wrong knowledge? And Sardananji adds one more thing to this, that truth is not revealed if this ignorance is present. Say, for example, somebody is deluded. Swami Vivekananda gives a wonderful example to explain the truth of this delusion. He said, when I was traveling in a desert for miles together, he was born and brought up in Bengal. He had never a chance to see the deserts of Western India. But when he went there, he saw miles and miles of sand, which was new to him. You won't get these deserts in green areas like Bengal, Uttar Pradesh and other places where there is so much of greenery. So when you first go, a person who has never seen a desert, one sees a layer of water far off. It's a optical illusion. So Vivekananda, when he first went, he was feeling very thirsty. So he thought there is a lake. Later on, he even went towards it. He thought maybe I can get some fresh water because of the properties of light, the hot air above the sand gives an idea that there is some water. The air on touching the surface of the land, the vast expanse of land, it is known as mirage. If you see, you can see this very common. Of course, those who live in the deserts, they know it's a mirage. They don't run after those imaginary water bodies. So he thought, and the nearer he went, it seemed to vanish or go further away. So he said, when will I reach that? Suddenly then he realized that in the textbooks I had read about the mirage. Though he had not seen it, only when he saw that it was a delusion, then he says, he mentioned this in one of his talks in California, because some people might have asked him, what do you mean by this delusion? What is ajnana? What is ignorance? He gave this example. So he says, for some days I felt there is water all around me. But when I really suddenly realized, I read somewhere that it is just a mirage. It's just a reflection of the air which gives an impression that there is water. So the question now asked, what is the cause of this delusion? Swami Shardanji is asking, anticipating that the hearer or the inquirer will ask this question. And when did it come to us? If at all we accept the idea that there is delusion and we don't see things in the right perspective because we are under delusion. So the cause of this delusion or this wrong perception is ignorance, ajnana, just as it is in all other situations. Then the question is, how can you know that ignorance first appeared? So he says, as long as you remain in ignorance, all of your efforts to realize this will be futile, because you first have to understand Somebody has to tell you that what you are seeing is a mirage. It's not a real water body. And then when you go near and experiment for yourself, then you really realize that there's no water there. It's just sand and sand and sand. So till the ignorance about spiritual topics is removed, we will imagine that the different types of progress that one claims one has made is very real, even if it is a hallucination or a strong imagination. People under the influence of some nervous, you can say some problem with the nervous system, can imagine, can see things. But that doesn't mean he's having a vision. So how do we know what is the reason for this? So then he gives another example. He says, everyone, it can be explained very easily because many of us have dreams. Though some of them don't remember, most of us remember, especially if the dream is a nightmare or something which is very strong. But one experience everybody knows, that while one is dreaming, it appears to be very, very real. Nobody in a dream ever thinks that what he is witnessing, it's only when you wake him up, you feel, oh, okay, it was just a dream. So also in spiritual life, he says, as long as one is dreaming, the dream appears to be a reality. But as long as we are under ignorance, the delusion will remain. So it is just like a dream. Dream is like a delusion, or delusion is like a dream. So you may say that sometimes while dreaming, he's going, these are logical analysis. This is a logical analysis done by some of the commentators on Vedanta, because there's a lot of discussion if you go to Shankara's commentary on Vedanta, where they discuss, it is known as Avasthatraya Vivechana, means discussion on the 3 states or the 4 states of mind. Waking state, when is fully awake, alert. Dream state, either it is a dream as in when you go to sleep, or maybe it can be a daydream. Some people are adept in that. Even while they are awake, they slip away into some kind of daydreaming till somebody wakes them up, shakes them from that state. So the Avastha Traya means 3 states which we understand. The 4th state is something which you realize after you reach it. It is known as Turiya. So we start with Jagrut, which we are familiar with. Any alert person will not daydream, or when he's sleeping, he will not see things or imagine things. Second state is when you go to sleep, part of your sleep is not deep sleep. A majority of our sleep is constitutes dream state. It is known as swapna. And a little bit of it, if you are lucky, is deep sleep, which is known as sushupti. Sushupti is a state where you neither you see the world as you see in the waking state, nor do you see a dream world. You just are enveloped with ignorance. Otherwise, Sushupti would itself become a great achievement, though it is very important to have a little Sushupti or little deep sleep. Otherwise, our body will be shattered. We need some sleep. Though most of our sleep is full of dreams, which is not actually good sleep. That is why they say to compensate for that, you have to go to a 4th state, which is known as Turiya, which happens maybe fractionally when you meditate. When you go into deep meditation, if you are alert, if you don't feel drowsy, and there are many people when they sit for meditation, they go into a sleep state. It's very natural, because deep sleep, especially if you are tired and you just sit in a very peaceful place, quiet place, half of or most of the people find it difficult to stay awake. It will simply slip into that deep sleep state. That's not the Turiya state. Turiya is something when you are fully alert, but you are not dreaming anything. So that is how he explains. As long as one is dreaming, you cannot convince, of course, that person who is sleeping. He's dreaming and he's in his dream world. He's enjoying the dream. No amount of telling him, unless you wake him up, will convince him that he's in a dream world. Just give up the dream world. And we say it is a dream compared with the waking state, and it is recognized as unreal. When you get up, you are happy or you are sad, depending on what type of dream you had, that the dream is over. If it is a nightmare, you are happy that, oh, this was after all a dream, I am fine. So he says, some people argue that even in dream, they get a dream that they are dreaming. So how is it possible? What state of mind is that where you are dreaming that you are sleeping and having a dream? He says some people even feel that or they get such a dream. Then he says, these situations appear from the memory of the waking state. So in we have a memory that we have been, a memory which is integral with us, that every day we go to bed, we are awake as long as we have not fallen asleep. Though we say in a general we have fallen asleep, we have been dreaming. And a small portion, that alternate state, if you don't wake up throughout the night, then we alternate between dream and deep sleep. And the quality of your sleep will depend on how much of deep sleep you had. If you had a very, you may say, disturbed waking experience, lot of trauma, mental trauma, then it is likely that your sleep also will be disturbed. There will be a lot of imaginations, lot of nightmares, lot of unpleasant things which you did in the waking state, which will trouble you. And the dream state, if it is prolonged and you lack that small deep sleep state, then even the 8 hours or 10 hours of sleep is not enough, because the body, the very constitution of the body and the mind complex struggles to get this sushupti. It cannot stay awake for a long time. It cannot remain in the dream state for a long time. It has to have touch the sushupti state. So many of these Vedantic systems say that this shows that every person, whether it's an animal, any living being, unless a person is mad, normal people want sleep. And you know how difficult it is if one cannot sleep. They'll struggle, they'll even take some kind of medicine to sleep. So Sushupti, it reminds you, see, this is the difference Swami Shardananji is making. Sushupti is a state when you are having deep bliss maybe for a small time, and you yearn to go back to sleep. Why sleep is so important, especially young children, they feel very disturbed if you wake them up. So also with old people, and they struggle if they don't get sleep. Why is it? Because there is that we touch temporarily, though it is out of ignorance, we touch the Anandamaya Kosha, the fifth level of our existence. It happens when we are totally disconnected from the physical world, or at least the world which our senses bring to us. And we are also free from the dream state when we are in Sushupti, where we are free from our dreams also. We are free from our imaginary world. So physically our senses are inactive, though the autonomous nervous system goes on. The body keeps functioning. That's a different thing. But you are not seeing the world, nor you are experiencing the dream world. You are just settling down into a state known as Sushupti. Even though it is a very small period, one gets so much of joy that if one has a good sleep, he feels very happy and refreshed when he gets up. But Vedanta says even that is out of due to ignorance. Similarly, the Turiya state, where we get the joy of deep sleep state while we are still awake, is used here to explain the bliss of seeing God in all beings. If that is the goal, why can't we see it? It is just like we have a goal of having good sleep every day. We go into deep sleep. We try to go into deep sleep and lie down. But even after 10 hours of lying down, we feel we have not slept enough. Especially if you have a disturbed traumatic experiences in the waking state, because you carry that in our dream state. We have a tendency to carry that, and they'll disturb us there. So careless living is one of the reasons. Careless living in the waking state leads to ignorance in the dream state, and then we imagine so many things, mostly unpleasant. And even if it is a pleasant thing, we still experience the mind is active. And then the body protests, say, no, 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 just have some sleep, because that is our original state, the deep sleep, sushupti. At least have a few moments of deep sleep. Otherwise, you will continue to just lie down in the bed till you get that bliss of that small, a little taste of the original bliss. He says, Swami Shardanji says, that in the waking state, to see God pervading all the beings is as difficult as to have the experience of Brahman transcending the state of Sushupti and reaching Turiya. So most of the spiritual aspirants, he's defining the goal, aspire to be reach that state where there is no more delusion, no more ignorance. So the essence of all the mantras, all the sadhana, according to Swami Shardananji, can only be one. It is, of course, Buddha was more direct and particular. He said that is the only goal. You don't have anything. The only way you can get rid of misery is to go beyond it, to attain to nirvana. Here they don't say nirvana, but they say removal of ignorance, ajnana. That is the goal of Vedanta. So then the next question is, okay, I agree. Till then, this point, I agree that Turiya is the goal. So we are running out of time. I'll just conclude in a few minutes. So the next question which we'll discuss in our alternate Sunday class is, what is the way out then? Now, Swami Shardanji has explained what are the obstacles to sadhana and what are we set out to remove. That is ignorance. But what do we do? If that is sadhana, then what are we doing here? If one is convinced of that, then he will take spiritual life seriously. Otherwise, for him, as Swami Shardanji has made a long list, religion is absolutely has no impact on his life because he has erroneous ideas. He thinks going to certain temple, offering certain worship rituals, whichever religion he belongs to, or doing certain practices on a fixed day or fixed time and waving certain things. He believes that he has attained some spirituality, but true spirituality, true goal, truth is not revealed till this ignorance or delusion is present. So what is the goal? The goal is to remove this delusion or ignorance. And how? What is the way? That is now explained in the next chapter or next paragraph. What is the way out then? So the answer is one must eradicate this ignorance. And then Shardanji says, I can assure you, as have the masters before us, they are not giving empty promises. That's the role of incarnation. That's the role of all the scriptures. When Arjuna is confused, he is asking a question. Krishna says, this is definitely what is going to happen. Nothing will be lost. The worldly treasures and other things may have to leave behind. But I assure you, O Arjuna, and Krishna says, nothing will be lost. Whatever you have gained by your spiritual practices will be carried over, because it is a subtle thing. It's not some bank balance that you will have to leave behind. You cannot take it to your next birth. So that is ignorance. Thinking, taking the impermanent things to be permanent, that is one of the ways ignorance makes a person deluded. So what the sages have told, what these great spiritual leaders of the world have told us, he's trying to analyze it in a very rational way. And now in the next phase, he will say what is the way out of ignorance. So if there is any question, you can see. Otherwise, okay, there are no questions. So I'll conclude. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Can stop.